Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be exploring a topic that I think is absolutely fascinating, the link between a mother's emotions and how her baby develops.
Oh, definitely. A really crucial one.
Yeah, and this is both prenatally and after the baby's born, so
Yeah.
really covering that whole
The whole journey.
journey. Yeah, we're actually going to be taking a look at a really interesting Spanish language podcast called Podcast Emociones Maternas.
Oh.
And I think you're going to be pretty surprised by just how much power a mom's feelings actually have on their little ones.
It is pretty remarkable. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really makes you think about the whole concept of that mother-baby bond in a whole new light.
Absolutely. So I want to jump right into the science here.
Okay.
We all know that the placenta, that's the lifeline, right? It provides all those essential nutrients and that oxygen to the baby.
Right.
But I'm curious what this podcast has to say about the placenta when it comes to transferring emotion.
So that's where it gets really interesting. You see, the placenta, it's not just like a one-way street for food and oxygen.
Okay.
It's actually more like a highway for mom's hormones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when a mom is experiencing those strong emotions, things like stress, happiness, excitement, all of that, it's not just staying with her.
So it's like a direct line from mom's feelings right into the baby's world.
Exactly. And we're talking about actual chemicals here. You know? Like cortisol, that's our stress hormone. And then you've got endorphins. Those are the ones that give us those happy vibes.
Wow. So mom's stress, her actual stress hormone, can end up in the baby.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what kind of impact does that have on the baby, especially long term?
Well, the podcast actually highlights some pretty significant research on this.
Oh, okay.
And one study, I found this really fascinating, showed that babies of mothers who were under a lot of stress while they were pregnant, those babies were actually more likely to be anxious and have trouble, managing their emotions as toddlers.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thinking behind it is that being exposed to high levels of cortisol while they're still in the womb
Right.
can actually change the way certain parts of their brains develop.
So it's not just about mom feeling stressed. It can actually have these long-term effects on her child's emotional development.
Exactly, yeah. And it could be years down the line.
That's incredible.
That's powerful stuff.
It really makes you think twice about, brushing off stress as just part of life.
Oh, for sure.
Especially when you realize it can have such a real measurable impact on a baby.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there.
Oh.
The podcast also talked about how chronic stress during pregnancy can lead to an increased risk of premature birth
Oh, wow.
and low birth weight.
Wow, that's serious stuff.
Yeah, it seems like having all that extra cortisol floating around can really disrupt the normal, healthy progression of a pregnancy.
Okay, so we've talked about the negative side of things, the stress, but I'm really curious about the flip side, right? What happens when mom is generally happy and relaxed?
Well, that's when things start to get really exciting. Because, just like those stress hormones can travel to the baby,
Right.
those feel-good hormones, those endorphins and dopamine, they make the trip too.
Oh, that's great to hear. So what are some of the benefits of all those happy hormones reaching the baby?
Well, there was this one study that they mentioned in the podcast, and it found that babies whose moms were, generally happier and more content during pregnancy,
Okay.
those babies actually ended up with stronger immune systems.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were better at regulating their sleep-wake cycles, too.
So they're just all around healthier and happier.
It really seems that way. And, the parents even describe these babies as more easygoing and adaptable, too.
Wow. So it really does sound like a positive feedback loop. Happy mom, happy hormones, happy and healthy baby.
Exactly. It all kind of works together.
This makes me wonder, though, is it about never feeling stressed or sad, or is it more about finding that balance, overall?
That's a great question. And to be honest, that's one of the things I really appreciated about this podcast.
Okay.
They make it very clear that it's not about being, perfectly blissful all the time.
Right. That's not realistic.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
more about recognizing that you're going to have those negative emotions, right? Everyone does.
Of course.
The key is finding healthy ways to cope with them. And then overall, just trying to cultivate a more positive and balanced emotional state.
It's all about that bigger picture, isn't it?
Exactly.
So we've talked about the impact of mom's emotions during pregnancy, but we all know this emotional connection doesn't magically disappear once the baby's born.
Right. Of course not.
So what does the podcast have to say about the importance of a mother's emotions during those early months and years?
Well, that's where this idea of secure attachment comes in.
Okay.
It's all about how a mother's ability to be emotionally available for her baby,
Right.
being present, responsive, really attuned to their needs, how all of that helps the baby develop a sense of security and trust in the world.
So it's more than just being physically there. It's about that deep emotional connection.
Absolutely. It's about creating a space where the baby feels safe, loved, and understood.
That makes perfect sense. Can you give us some specific examples of what that emotional availability might look like in everyday life?
Sure. So things like responding to your baby's cries consistently and promptly, making eye contact, engaging in playful interactions.
Just really being present with them.
Exactly. And being sensitive to their cues.
So it's about understanding what they're trying to communicate, even though they can't use words yet.
Exactly. It's like you're learning their language.
That's amazing. And it makes me wonder, how do babies actually pick up on all those emotional cues? I mean,
Yeah.
are they really that attuned to their mother's feelings?
That is one of the most incredible things about babies.
Yeah.
Research actually suggests that they are incredibly sensitive to their mother's emotional states.
So they're like tiny emotion detectives, constantly picking up on those subtle signals.
That's a great way to put it. And the podcast really stresses how important this attunement is for the baby's development.
So what kind of impact does this have on the baby?
Well, the podcast says that babies actually learn how to regulate their own emotions by watching their mothers.
Oh, wow. So it's like mom is modeling those essential emotional skills.
Exactly. If a mother is able to manage her stress and, express her emotions in a healthy way, her baby is more likely to learn those same skills.
It's almost like an unspoken lesson, isn't it? Mom isn't just providing love and care, she's also teaching her baby how to navigate the ups and downs of life.
Absolutely. And it's a pretty powerful form of teaching because those early experiences, they really shape the foundation for a child's emotional development.
So I'm curious, what kind of practical advice does the podcast offer to mothers who, are trying to manage this emotional roller coaster?
Oh, they've got a ton of great tips, but I think maybe we should say that for after a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be right back with some actionable advice for all the moms and moms to be out there. We're back and ready to dive into some practical advice from the podcast Emotionis Maternis.
Yeah, they really offer some great tips.
Yeah, so what can moms actually do to, you know, create that positive emotional environment for themselves and their baby?
Well, the podcast really emphasizes that, it's not about being perfect, right? It's more about having those tools to navigate the ups and downs that inevitably come with life, and especially with motherhood.
Absolutely.
So one of the first things they recommend is incorporating some relaxation techniques into your routine.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm feeling stressed, I find that even just taking a few deep breaths or, doing a little bit of yoga can really help to calm things down.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Did they mention any practices that are particularly beneficial for moms to be?
They did. They specifically highlighted prenatal yoga, which is, it's designed to support the changes that a woman's body goes through during pregnancy.
Right.
And it not only helps with, physical discomfort, but it also really promotes relaxation and mindfulness.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they also talked about meditation.
Okay.
Even if it's just, taking a few minutes each day to sit quietly and focus on your breath.
I love that. It's a good reminder that self-care doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing, right?
Exactly.
It can be those little moments throughout the day that really make a difference.
Absolutely.
So besides relaxation techniques, what else did they suggest?
Well, they really stressed the importance of having a strong support system.
Okay, that's so important.
That could be your partner, your family, your friends, even a therapist.
Right.
Anyone you can talk to, vent to, and just, rely on for help when you need it.
That feeling of being supported can make such a world of difference, especially during those early days of parenthood.
Oh, absolutely. When everything just feels so new and overwhelming. Yeah, exactly.
It can be tough to ask for help, though.
Oh, for sure. It's like we think we have to do it all on our own.
Right, exactly. And the podcast actually addresses that.
Oh, good. What do they say?
Well, they had this great advice. They said to think about the people in your life who are really good listeners, who offer that, non-judgmental support,
Okay.
and who you feel comfortable being vulnerable with.
That's so important.
It is. And they said, start by reaching out to just one person
Okay.
and see how it goes from there.
That's a really good tip because sometimes it feels less daunting to start small,
Yeah, definitely.
and, build from there.
Absolutely.
So what else did the podcast recommend?
Well, another thing they highlighted was the power of connecting with your baby even before they're born.
Oh, that's lovely. What did they suggest?
Things like talking to your bump, singing songs, even just, placing your hand on your belly and feeling those little kicks. Oh, that's so sweet. It's like you're starting that loving communication right from the very beginning.
Exactly. And it's not just good for the baby. It helps mom to feel more connected and positive, too.
It's like you're already building that bond.
Yeah, it's laying the foundation for a strong relationship.
And I think that leads perfectly into the next point, because the podcast also talked about the importance of, limiting your exposure to negative news and information.
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah. Especially during pregnancy. It's so easy to get caught up in all that negativity.
Right, and it can be really draining,
Yeah.
especially when you're already dealing with all those emotional and physical changes.
Absolutely. It's like everything just feels more intense during pregnancy.
It does, and so it really makes sense to be mindful about what you're exposing yourself to.
So instead of, scrolling through social media or watching the news before bed.
Right, all that doom scrolling.
Exactly.
They suggest maybe listening to some uplifting music, reading a good book, maybe spending some time in nature.
I love those ideas. They're so simple, but so effective.
They are. It's easy to forget about the simple things that bring us joy, especially when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed.
Absolutely. And speaking of simple things, the podcast also emphasized the importance of sleep and nutrition.
Oh, the basics.
The basics, exactly. But sometimes we need that reminder,
Yes,
right?
you do. It's so easy to let those things slide, especially when you're busy and, taking care of everyone else.
But when you're sleep deprived and not eating well, it's so much harder to manage stress and, maintain that positive outlook.
Absolutely. It's like, putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup.
And the podcast really emphasizes that, taking care of yourself is not selfish.
Right.
It's essential.
For being the best mom you can be.
Exactly.
Wow, this podcast really is packed with great advice.
It is. And you know what else I thought was really interesting?
What's that?
They suggested creating a joy list.
A joy list. What's that?
It's basically a list of, activities, people, places, anything that consistently brings you happiness.
Oh, I love that. It's like having a personalized toolkit for boosting your mood.
Exactly. So for me, my joy list would definitely include spending time in nature, listening to music, connecting with loved ones. Those are my big ones.
Yeah, those are all great. But it really is so individual, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Could be anything. Taking a hot bath, reading a good book, working on a hobby, whatever brings you joy.
It's such a simple concept, but so powerful.
It is. It's like having a little reminder to, prioritize those small moments of joy throughout the day.
Especially when things are feeling tough.
Exactly.
It's so easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day and forget about those things that bring us happiness.
It is. But even just taking, 5 minutes to do something you love can really shift your mood and your energy levels.
Absolutely. I think this idea of a joy list is something I'm going to start implementing in my own life.
Me too.
Oh.
I think it's brilliant.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. It really feels like we're going beyond just, the surface level advice
I agree.
and really getting to the heart of what it means to support mother's emotional well-being.
Exactly. And, the podcast makes this really important point
Okay.
that a mother's emotional health, it's not just a personal matter.
It's not.
It's actually fundamental to the well-being of her child and ultimately to the health and happiness of society as a whole.
Wow. That's a really powerful statement.
It is. It makes you realize just how interconnected we all are, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how important it is to support mothers and families.
So we've talked about the science, we've talked about the impact, we've shared all this practical advice, but I think the most important question is, what does this all mean for our listeners, for you? What's the takeaway message you want to leave them with?
I think the most important message is that, you have more power than you realize.
I like that. Tell me more.
Your emotions matter. And by taking care of your own emotional well-being,
Right.
you're giving your baby the best possible start in life.
That's such a beautiful message, and it's so empowering too, isn't it?
It is. It reminds us that even though parenthood can be incredibly challenging,
For sure.
it's also an incredible opportunity for growth and transformation.
Absolutely, both for mom and for baby.
Exactly. And it all begins with understanding this profound connection between a mother's heart and her baby's developing world.
It's really quite remarkable when you think about it, isn't it?
It is.
This whole idea that a mother's emotions can shape her baby's emotional landscape, it's mind-blowing.
It is, and it really highlights the importance of, creating a supportive and nurturing environment for mothers.
Absolutely, because when moms thrive, babies thrive.
That's exactly.
Well, that brings us to the end of another deep dive.
Wow, that went by fast.
It did. We hope you found it informative and, maybe even a little bit inspiring.
I hope so too.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world around us. It's pretty amazing to think about, how much influence a mother's emotional state actually has on her baby.
It really is.
We've explored the science, talked about those long-term impacts, even gotten some practical tips from the podcast.
Yeah, lots of good stuff.
But I think, for me, one of the most important things we've touched on is just the importance of, awareness.
Oh, absolutely.
Just knowing about this connection. It can
Yeah.
totally change the way we think about pregnancy, about parenthood.
It's like, you're being given this secret map to your baby's well-being.
Yeah, it's not just about, feeding them and changing diapers anymore.
Right.
It's about shaping a tiny human's emotional world.
That's powerful.
It is powerful, and it can feel like a lot of pressure,
I can see that, but I think the podcast actually does a really good job of reframing that.
Oh, okay, how so?
Instead of pressure, they encourage you to think of it as an opportunity.
Yep.
An opportunity to, be more mindful of your emotions, to prioritize self-care, and to, not be afraid to reach out for support.
Yeah, to ask for help when you need it.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that taking care of your emotional well-being, it's not selfish. It's actually one of the most important things you can do as a parent.
Absolutely. It's like they said in the podcast, when you invest in your own well-being, you're investing in your baby's future.
And that includes, their emotional intelligence, their resilience, even their ability to navigate the world with confidence.
All of that. It really does all start with mom.
So thinking back to all the advice we've talked about today, what do you think is the most valuable thing our listeners can take away and actually use in their own lives?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's the power of those small, consistent actions,
Okay.
It doesn't have to be about these huge changes or, grand gestures.
Right.
Even just taking 5 minutes to meditate, going for a quick walk in nature, calling a friend,
Yeah, those little things.
those little things can make a world of difference.
It's a good reminder that self-care, it's not a luxury. It's a necessity.
Exactly. And it's something you can incorporate into your daily life bit by bit.
I love that.
And, the podcast really emphasizes that it's never too early to start.
Oh, that's true.
Even if you're just thinking about starting a family someday, all of this, it can really help you create that foundation of emotional well-being.
For yourself and for your future children.
Exactly.
So to all the moms and moms-to-be out there, know that you're not alone on this journey.
You've got this.
Your emotions matter. Your well-being matters.
Absolutely.
And don't be afraid to reach out for support when you need it.
There are so many resources available.
And to everyone else listening, let's remember that supporting mothers means supporting the emotional well-being of a whole generation.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It's about creating a world where families can truly thrive,
Absolutely. A world where everyone feels supported and loved.
I love it.
And it all starts with recognizing the incredible power of a mother's heart.
Well, that's our deep dive for today.
I hope everyone enjoyed it.
We hope you learned something new, found some inspiration, and, maybe even feel a little more connected to the incredible journey of motherhood.
It's an amazing journey.
It is.
Full of challenges, but also so much joy.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world around us.